Welcome to Living a Graceful Life. I'm Denise Medved, your host, and I'm also the creator and founder of the Ageless Grace Brain Health Program, which is in all 50 US states and 30 other countries. And the purpose of this show is to remind everyone who's watching that it's never too late to begin making choices to create the life that you want to live. Regardless of your age, your background, your social station, where you live, your geographic location, you have possibilities for making choices every day in every way that can make a positive difference in the quality of your life and invite more grace into your body, your mind, your spirit, and your emotions. So that brings me to our wonderful guest tonight, Gail Condrick, who's going to talk to us about discovering your sacred purpose, the life you were born to live. And let me introduce Gail. She's an author and a teacher, as well as a frequent speaker on topics of creativity, spirituality, personal empowerment. She's been studying spirituality and mysticism at the Caroline Myss Educational Development Institute since 2004 and is a sacred contracts archetypal consultant. She's developed and helped hundreds of people learn more about their life purpose through understanding their archetypal patterns. She's also an Ageless Grace educator, an advanced labyrinth facilitator, a NIA teacher, and a former white belt trainer. And she's a retired television executive, so this is easy for her to do. She's also the author of Walking the Grove, Journal of a Sacred Encounter. Her virtual and in-person courses include deepening your connection with nature, creating your own journal of a sacred encounter, The Art of Observation, Ancient Rhythms, New Connections, Release Your Inner Artist Released, Your Destiny is in Your Closet, Time Travel for Creatives, and Spirituality, Nature, and the Labyrinth. And we'll tell you more at the end of this program how you can find out more about purchasing her book or how you might visit her website and learn more about all of the different services and courses that she has to offer. So welcome, Gail.
Thank you. Thank you, Denise. I always love talking with you, seeing you, being on your show with you, all of that is very special. Thanks for inviting me.
I'm so happy that you're here. And we have such an interesting topic tonight. I don't know how many of you watching know, for example, what an archetype is. So maybe that should be the first question, Gail. What is an archetype?
Okay, well, let me start by saying that archetypal patterns are really energy patterns, and you're all very familiar with them. You use them in your everyday language. They're just part of the psyche. They're part of the unconscious, and they're international. So that, for example, if I say, that guy is such a clown, what comes to your mind? You know, there are aspects of that come to your mind. Or if I say, what a queen, there's aspects of energy patterns and your belief system that come right up to your conscious awareness. And these are based in myth and psyche and generations of people saying the same words in their time. And in our time, part of our job of being alive is to have those archetypes grow and expand and fit our time. And I think that's kind of an interesting thing to think about, isn't it? You know, how does the archetype shift and change, but is the same basic energy pattern? So that's what an archetype is. And if you start thinking about that, you know, what are the attributes of a clown? Well, in any archetypal pattern, there's going to be what we would call a positive side or a light side and a shadow side. Positive is not the word I wanted to use. Let's go with the light side and the shadow side, because both of them together are part of the learning experience that someone gets by embodying that archetype or being around that archetype.
Beautiful, interesting. So does everyone have an archetype? Is it just one archetype, or do you have more than one archetype?
Well, yes, and yes to all of the above. And what I do, I'm representing the work of Caroline Mace. I'm a sacred contracts consultant. So I deal with 72 different archetypal patterns. That would be 7-2. And so, but what happens is there are 4 archetypal patterns that everybody shares. And then there are the others that come in to fit us, who we are, what we're here for, how to live this life with purpose, and the life we are designed to live with grace. And so all of those things come together. And the 4 that we have in common are the ones that we are born with, the family that raised us, and that is the child archetype. And I always think of the child archetype, like that's the one archetype when it's like Baskin and Robbins, you know, what flavor of childhood did you experience? And then there's one that we're all familiar with. It's called the saboteur. It's the one that gets in the way of our good intentions, and the one that we learn to listen to make sure that we're not stopping ourselves from something we really want to do. Another one is called the prostitute, which can be off-putting at first, but when you understand the role, the light and the shadow of the prostitute, the light side is that I am so strong in myself that nothing and no one will let me sell out what my life purpose, my soul purpose is. And then the 4th one that we're also all familiar with is the victim. And the victim is the archetypal pattern that we need to both experience at some point in our lives, maybe more than we would like. But what it does for us is it brings out our personal strengths, and it helps us. The light side is to create personal boundaries so that I know just when that boundary is being crossed, and I can start saying, wait a minute, I'm not going to be victimized by this. Same thing with the others. Wait a minute, this is my child looking at this problem. I don't know if that's the right way to deal with it. Or wait a minute, this person is really asking me to do something that's not part of my belief system or my goals or the way I want to live in the world. That would be my prostitute being tested. And then the saboteur, wait a minute, just because it's January and I have promised that I'm going to do 19 things in the next 3 weeks was probably not a good plan. It's setting me up for failure. So do you see how these things can come into our lives in both practical and then on another level, sacred?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's fascinating, actually. So those are the 4 that we all have, regardless of what country we're born in or who our parents are or whatever, right?
Yes.
And you said there were 72 altogether. How many more does the average person have?
Well, in the idea of the sacred contracts, you have 12, 4 I've already listed, and then there are 8 others. And the 8 others are clues to not only your personality, but your purpose. And so we can talk about this on a level where I want to make sure you understand is not the full level, not any one person of you, but everybody understands it. In that we're talking here about why am I walking the earth in 2022? You know, what am I here to do? And probably sometime in your high school or college age, you did some sort of an aptitude test. And that aptitude test was, here's what she's good at. She's good at this, 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 and this. The archetypes are somewhat like that too, with one exception. An archetypal pattern is one that is so ingrained and so intrinsic to who you are. It's just like skin. You don't recognize it because it's you. And so you assume that everybody else can do the same thing because that's just autopilot for you, but it isn't. It's one of your special gifts. And so for me, understanding archetypes, not only my own, but those of other people, enable you to really see what you're here to do. And from that, empower you to live this best life.
That makes a lot of sense when you explain it that way. So how does one discover their purpose?
Well, I think that if you want to go the sacred contracts route, which is taking what am I here for to a different level, not what am I here for, what is the job I'm supposed to do, but what is my life purpose? If you're really ready to dig down into that, then you'll want to undertake a course of study. The Carolyn Mace work, you can get a certification and be a sacred contracts archetypal consultant. You can work with someone like me. You can buy archetypal cards and work with the archetypal cards. You can buy the book. By the way, I don't sell any of these. You would get these through Caroline Mace. And you can start reading this. And then there's a new one that came out maybe 6 or 7 years ago, which now has a new cover. And it's called Archetypes, Who Are You? But now it's called Archetypes, Learning About Your Inner Net, not internet.
That's clever. I like that.
Yeah, that's clever, isn't it? And so there's kind of been a shift to it. So what you're going to find is that if you really would like to spend some time on the delicious discovery of all about you on a deeper level, this is the way to start. And for me, it was life-changing. I started this in 2003 when this book, Sacred Contracts, was published. I had it on my nightstand. I walked around with it. I took it on vacations. I couldn't get through it, but I loved the appendix. I was in love with the appendix because what the appendix does is it takes each of those 72 archetypal patterns, and not only does it explain them, but it tells you how you're experiencing them on television programs, in films, in the news, who some of these people are who you might know, and what they're representing. Yeah, so the appendix, and then I was able to get into Carolyn Mace's Sacred Contracts class, and then we dove headfirst in. And what I discovered, and I think what people discover, is that once you learn a little bit about an archetypal pattern that's yours, it's not only familiar, it becomes fascinating. And you allow yourself to see, okay, yeah, that is something that's always been me. And that's the key phrase, it's always. So Denise, you had a 4-year-old archetypal pattern, as does everybody else. And you now have give or take 50 years, that same archetypal pattern who has grown with you and will continue to do that.
Fascinating. That's fascinating. Yeah. I just love it. I've always found this work so intriguing and captivating. And of course, one of the reasons is, I think, we're all fascinated by learning more about ourselves. My opinion is that's why we're here, to learn more about who we really are, who is the essence of us, what are we really? And so that people are always fascinated, I feel, in learning more about themselves. And certainly this is an interesting way to learn more about themselves. Would you be willing to share a couple of your archetypes and tell us a little bit about them?
Okay, I will. I'd like to just kind of tell you a story, and from the story you'll learn about the archetypes. How's that sound to you?
Perfect.
All right. So the year's 2004. I finally walked into my very first Carolyn Mace extravaganza Sacred Contracts class my class 1 of what would become a 2-year, then a 3-year, and then since 2004, continuing exercise program. And I am very excited about it. One of the things that comes up right off the bat is that the idea of your sacred contract and identifying who these 12 are and how they work together is just fascinating to me. It's just fascinating. And suddenly I realized that as I was going through the archetypes and selecting them, and it's a little bit like an eye test. You need somebody to say to you, is 1 clearer or is it 2? Is it 1 or is it 2? And is it 1 or is, and then you decide, you say, oh yeah, that's it. It's subtle. So one of my archetypal patterns, since you have asked, Denise, so let me just give you a hint and you figure it out. Let's see, as you were talking, you said about my background, right? That I was an Asia's Grace educator, a NIA trainer and teacher, a labyrinth facilitator, and I had 5 or 6 courses virtual and that include workbooks and so on. What do you think one of my archetypal patterns, just wild guess, might be?
Teacher.
Bingo. Now, so I'll tell you about my teacher. So here I am. I'm at this first event, and I don't think of myself as a teacher. I never taught school, ever. Never taught school. But what I did know that I was able to do, and that now that I look back, is I had years and years and years of training on how to take complex messages and make them understandable. Years of it. I was doing television programs. We had to explain to the public details about all kinds of things, whether it was a news report or whether it was what is the latest on how to acquire housing. Anything that required detailed analysis, I had to break that down. So I was always writing training manuals and other types of things. So there was my teacher in training. And that was part of the teacher, but not in a million years did I think I was a teacher. But since retirement, the teacher has stepped forward. She has stepped forward. But it isn't like, I want to say it's not all that rosy a picture of if I discover my archetype, all my problems will vanish. No, it's a step-by-step process of getting you ready to do what it is you need to do. Now, today, I believe my teacher archetype is in full gear, and she's ready to sit you down and not let you get up until I've taught you something. Yeah. And I have done that on more than one occasion. So the positive side of the teacher archetypal pattern is that I animate, I energize, I find a way to communicate difficult information to people and to help guide them. And why do I do that? So that they can become their best empowered selves. If I can do that for someone, then they're going to go out and change the world. My part is giving them the self-confidence to do it. And then they're going to find the way through their filter of their archetype to decide what is it I'm going to do. So the positive part of the teacher, the positive part of the teacher is just what we say. The shadow side of the teacher is twofold. One of them is that she can't stop teaching ever, ever, ever. So if you ask me a question, or if you say something like, gee, I really like your new earrings. Well, 10 minutes later, I'm still going to be talking to you about where I purchased them, what the materials are. Oh, did you know that that material is rare and is only found on this island? That's where I'm going with it. So it's just, so because the teacher's going to teach you something, right? The other shadow side of the teacher that I would have to look out for and other people have to look out for is that as a teacher, when you have this archetypal pattern, one of the things that you have to be careful of is knowing when the student is ready to leave. And I don't mean just leave the classroom, although that has happened as well, but to appreciate that they may have learned something that I haven't taught them, and that that's okay, that that's great, that I'm not their only source. I'm not their only source. And if you have, for example, a teacher archetype, probably in your background, teachers were important to you. You can think about the teachers who helped shape your life as you were growing up. And you had some relationships with teachers. So in the sacred contract idea, the people, the places, and the events will all come together to do what needs to be done.
It's interesting that you say that teachers are often a huge influence in someone's life, because I have many times when I've been asked who are my mentors, who inspired me, the three most important people in my life, other than my immediate parents and my grandmother, were three of my teachers, one in elementary school, one in high school, and one in college. Both had huge influence over my life and what I chose to do and how I chose to be in the world. So it's interesting that you say that. You used a phrase that I thought was interesting. You said, "My teacher archetype has stepped forward now in my life at this point in time." So does our purpose change as we age or as we retire, or do different archetypes that we've always had come to the forefront?
Well, yes to all the above. And let me help you a little bit more with that. You're not just one archetype, you're 12. So when I say the teacher steps forward, it means that, for example, right now on this type of program, obviously I'm in teacher mode. I'm in teacher, speaker, presenter mode. So my teacher's really happy. This will, if there were a little star around my head, my stars would be flashing. Oh, we're teachers. Finally.
I'm so glad that your archetype is happy.
Yeah, she's so happy. Oh, I'm so happy she's doing what she's supposed to do. Now, however, it's one of 12. And so when I mean it steps forward, it's stepping forward for the occasion. It has also stepped forward occasionally on first dates, which was not as good. So, you have to know when it's working. The question that you have asked me, though, about what happens to it is that you're going to have the same archetypes throughout your life. However, with your maturation, so do they. And so they will go deeper, they will become more involved, they will have new types of issues that they need to deal with. And so that part of it, I think, is really intriguing. At least I think it's intriguing to see how do they mature. Now, if we were in a sacred contracts class, the answer to that would be, you're here in 2022, this is your lifetime, and you are all of us. It is not lost on me, as an aside, by the way, that Denise calls her teachers, she calls them educators. So if you don't think she's involved with teacher, it's right there. She calls you Ageless Grace educators. So you're already on this train. Anyway, but what happens? So the teacher archetypal pattern has the same elements it had in 1850 or in the time of Plato. The same big goals, the same myths. However, in 2022, what's happening is that the teacher is adapting to our times in many, many different ways, and is essentially changing the face of what is teacher, or changing the face of what is mother, or changing the face of what is father. All of these things shift and change with our times, so that we are bringing forth both the shadow and light of all of our archetypal patterns.
So there's the changing of the person itself. I'm obviously different in the world when I was 17 or 37, and now that I'm 70, I'm different and I'm doing different things. So there's that change, but then there's also, you're saying, the changes in the world itself.
Yes, it's the changes in the world, and it's in the cosmic soul. So what we're talking about now, if I can keep this theme, is we are talking about what is needed in this time going forward, and the seeds that we're planting for the 7th generation as well. And so all of that is happening at the same time. By knowing ourselves, we contribute to that. By sharing our gifts, we contribute to that. And I think it's really important, particularly now, to know what your gifts are and to get out there with them, whatever they are, whether they are empowerment that's subtle or right up front. If you have a leadership role, lead. If you have a teaching role, teach. If you have a leadership role and a teaching role, get going. You know, so it just depends on what you are. And one of the fun ways, just as a quick aside, to think about your archetypal patterns is to ask yourself, did I have a fairy tale that I really liked when I was a child?
Oh, that's interesting. It's an interesting question.
Yeah, you're looking at things symbolically, not literally necessarily. So Denise, did you have a favorite fairy tale?
Yeah, I did. And it wasn't really a fairy tale. It was a little book called Bucky Was Plucky, but right on. And it was about a goat that met all kinds of obstacles. And he just kept overcoming them and going on and moving on past them. And I loved that book.
Can I talk about that
Sure, we believe it or not, we've just got 2 or 3 minutes left to go. So I want to be sure and tell people where they can find you.
Okay. Well, I just want to say that Denise's book, her favorite book about overcoming obstacles, is archetypal, and it is the athlete archetype. And the athlete has signed up for the hurdle race. So being energized and being challenged and energized and challenged and energized would be a life pattern of an athlete. And it doesn't have anything to do with your physical skill.
There you go. I mean, that is definitely me. We've talked about that before, actually, that athlete's one of my archetypes. So how interesting to find it in that little children's book, right? But not surprising. So I want to just thank you again for being on here, Gail. And I want to tell everyone how to reach you and how to buy your wonderful book, which I have and I love. So would you tell us where they would find your book and how they would get in touch with you?
You can reach me through social media or through my website. It's my name, gailcondrick.com, or Facebook, Gail Condrick, and just friend me. And if we're not already friends, we will be. Or you can reach me at my name at gmail.com. And my website has information on purchasing my book, which is about sacred encounters. Yeah.
Yes, it's a beautiful, beautiful book. I highly recommend it to everyone. And her courses, I haven't done them all, but I've done 2 or 3 of them, and they're excellent courses as well. So again, it's Gail Condrick, C-O-N-G-A-I-L, first of all, because there's several ways to spell Gail, GAILCONDRICK.com. And also Gail Condrick at gmail.com. So, or pardon me, yeah, gmail.com. So I also want to just remind everyone that the whole purpose of this show and its mission is to remind you that it's never too late to begin to make choices that can actually help you live the life that you want to live. And certainly understanding more about yourself, knowing more about how you operate in the world, and understanding how other people operate in the world and why they might respond to you or react to you or behave the way that they do is a really valuable tool. So thank you so much for telling us more about archetypes and sacred contracts and how we can discover our purpose through them. If you would like to learn more about Ageless Grace Brain Health, which is very inventive and very creative, and there are several tools actually that accidentally, quote, quote, use the archetypes as ways to act or behave. One is called Express Yourself. One is called Get Down, Get Up. One is called Spelling Bee. If you'd like to know more about that, you can go to agelessgrace.com, AGELESSGRACE, or you can also find DVDs, playbooks, seminars, workshops about Ageless Grace at winwinwomen.com, WINWINWOMEN. So once again, thank you for being here. And I always like to end with a little question that is, what if each one of us spent a little time learning more about the archetypes that represent us, that we are? I think it would change the world. Thanks for being here.
You, Denise.